is no narrow principle, no field of cabined action that can be imposed on the Karma Yogin as his rule or his province. This much is true that every kind of works, whether small to man's imagination or great, petty in scope or wide, can be equally used in the progress towards liberation or for self-discipline. This much is also true that after liberation a man may dwell in any sphere of life and in any kind of action and fulfill there his existence in the divine. According as he is moved by the Spirit, he may remain in the sphere assigned to him by birth and circumstances, or break that framework and go forth to an untrammeled action which shall be the fitting body of his greatened consciousness and higher knowledge. To the outward eyes of men, the inner liberation may make no apparent difference in his outward acts, or, on the contrary, the freedom and infinity within may translate itself into an outward dynamic working so large and new that all regards are drawn by this novel force. If such be the intention of the Supreme within him, the liberated soul may be content with a subtle and limited action within the old human surroundings, which will in no way seek to change their outward appearance. But it may too be called to a work which will not only alter the forms and sphere of its own external life, but leaving nothing around it unchanged or unaffected, create a new world or a new order.
So, this is the general idea is that Karma Yoga prepares you for higher life, but you can do certain types of works, you can't do certain other types of work. This is it. So Swami is discussing that. He is saying there is no narrow principle, no field of payment action that can be imposed on the Karma Yogin as a rule or his province. There are so many interesting cases where Christ, for instance, he was the son of a carpenter. Then, what about our Kabir? Kabir was a weaver. So, and Shivda was a civil servant. So many cases like that, but they migrated to a spiritual life. So you can't. I often ask a question to my students. Does it mean that even if I am a hangman, for instance, my duty in society is to hang people when they are found guilty by the court? Can that also take you to a spiritual life? Theoretically, yes. But the thing is that when you are exposed to so many forces, it takes a long time for the spiritual thing to come. In the Chandogya Upanishad, there is a cart puller. He is pulling carts. That's his job. But he is a Brahman knower. So, this is what. All works can be used for a spiritual life. That's what we said. This much is true that every kind of works, whether small to man's imagination or a great, petty in scope or wide, can be equally used in the progress towards liberation of the self-discipline. Liberation or of self-discipline. This much is also true that after liberation, a man may dwell in any sphere of life or in any kind of action and fulfill there his existence in the divine. A good example of that is Kabir. He continued to do his weaving. He was a weaver. So, there are so many others, but they don't continue to do. They can change their outer profession. That is what is being discussed here. This much is also true that after liberation, a man may dwell in any sphere of life or in any kind of action and fulfill their existence in the divine. According as he is moved by the Spirit, he may remain in the sphere assigned to him by birth and circumstance. In India, birth determines your caste and your work and circumstances, or break that framework and go forth to an untroubled action, which shall be the fitting body of his consciousness and higher knowledge. There are many interesting cases where from your normal worldly profession you change and go to another field. Okay? There is a case of even Meera. She was a Meera, princess. But she gave up all that and started running for Krishna. Okay? So these are all very interesting cases where you can remain in your old profession or you can leave that as commanded by the divine. And then you can start a new type of work. According as he is moved by the Spirit, he may remain in the sphere assigned to him by birth and circumstances, or break that framework and go forth to an untroubled action, which shall be the fitting body of his greater consciousness and higher knowledge. To the outward eyes of men, the inner liberation may make no apparent difference in his outward acts. If he is a carpenter, he can remain a carpenter. And but the consciousness is changed to a spiritual consciousness. Or if you are a cart puller, the interesting case of the Chandogya Upanishad, your consciousness is changed, but the old work continues. This much is also...
Rangadhara,
Rangadhara,
one question. If you are a carpenter and you have realized the soul, does your work change? I mean, even if you continue being a carpenter, does the effect of it comes physically on the work done?
Definitely, because your consciousness determines your behavior and your way of perfection. In fact, the more your consciousness becomes spiritual, the effect on your carpentry will certainly change. Isn't it? That is bound to happen. Remember the Gita's words, yoga karmasu kaushalam. In other words, yoga is skill in works. So the moment you get a yogic consciousness, there is absolutely no doubt that your work will become very, very skillful and very, very beautiful. There is absolutely no doubt about it.
Yeah. I thought only the attitude towards work changes, but the work, materially, it has an effect on the material things or not.
Absolutely. It does change. That's exactly what I'm saying. Certainly your work changes, the quality of work changes. Otherwise that phrase, yoga karmasu kaushalam, makes no sense. Yoga, the consciousness of yoga, completely changes your skill in the works. What you could not do earlier, you will be able to do. Okay? But to others who are watching, they may not be able to see the difference except the type of work that they are doing. I remember one case in the press, okay, where the consciousness had changed and many of his colleagues saw that the quality of his work is different. Okay? They didn't notice and comment on it. So it does happen. Okay, so according as he is moved by the Spirit, he may remain in the sphere assigned to him by birth and circumstances, or break that framework. He need not remain a carpenter anymore. Okay? And go forth to an untroubled action, which shall be the fitting body of his great consciousness and higher knowledge. This is what happened to Christ also. He started moving all over and preaching. Okay? Many other cases would be like that, where they leave the old and continue with the new. Then I read the next sentence. To the outward eyes of men, the inner liberation may take no apparent difference in outward acts. So, you may not see any difference in the work that he is doing. But they are very, very observant. The quality of work will certainly differ. Okay. This much is true that every kind of work, whether small, to man's imagination, or great, petty in scope or wide, can be equally used in the progress toward liberation or self-discipline. This much is also true that after liberation, a man may dwell in any sphere of life and in any kind of action and fulfill there his existence in the divine. Swamdeva is discussing this earlier also because many people feel that certain types of work only should be done after liberation. Okay. For instance, you should not do any other work because it is meaningless. Okay. Imagine in theory that you should stop working at all. Don't do any work at all because it is meaningless. If you have reached the nirvana consciousness or the consciousness of the self. To the outward eyes of men, the inner liberation may make no apparent difference in his outward acts. Or, on the contrary, the freedom and infinity within may translate itself into an outward dynamic working so large and new that all regards are drawn by this novel force. Everybody notices the change. If such be the intention of the Supreme within him, the liberated soul may be content with a subtle and limited action within the old human surroundings, which will in no way seek to change their outward circumstance, outward appearance. But it may too be called to a work which will not only alter the forms and sphere of its own external life, but leaving nothing around it unchanged or unaffected, create a new world or a new order. This is certainly happening to Swamdeva himself. Okay. He was a poet, basically, but not a diplomat exactly, but a government executive he was. But he completely changed and brought about a new world, a new order. It's very, very obvious. When the supramental comes, it is a new world and a new order. So, I'll read out the summary and then we'll go on to the next one. A prevalent idea. So, what Swamdeva is saying in this para, in the Karma Yoga, any and every work, irrespective of human importance or insignificance, can be used for liberating the soul of man. As far as the work is concerned, there are no conditions or limits or prohibitions that are applicable to it. All roads can be used. If you remember, one very interesting case of Francis Thompson. He became famous because he wrote that magnificent poem, The Hound of Heaven. And you know what he was in life? He was a shoe shine. He used to shine shoes. And that was, so he is deep in his life. Okay? It is also true that after liberation, a man may engage in any work and yet fulfill his life in the divine consciousness. The Karma Yoga, the Karma Yogin, after realization, would continue in his profession of his birth or his family or any other hand, move to a much larger according to divine life. He may remain unknown to humanity or large, or he may be propelled to such a vaster and larger task according to the Supreme's intention that attracts attention of men all around. We are forgetting a very good example also, one of the rivers. Here Swamdeva is talking about limited work completely changing and will go to a divine consciousness. But what about Siddhartha, the Buddha? He was a king and he gave that up and became a monk. Okay. Going all over and preaching the liberation of soul. All depends on the highest divine will and his plan of action for the evolutionary course. The realized Karma Yogi would even create a new world order. See what's in this. Now we go to the next paragraph. A prevalent idea would persuade us. The last time who didn't read, I think, Seema didn't read, I think. Hello?
Dada, I will read?
Yes.
Will I read?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you.
A prevalent idea.
Ma. A prevalent idea would persuade us that the sole aim of liberation is to secure for the individual soul freedom from physical reward in the unstable life of the universe. If this freedom is once assured, there is no further work for it in life here or elsewhere, or only that which the continued existence of the body demands or the unfulfilled effects of past lives necessitate. This little, rapidly exhausted or consumed by the fire of yoga, will cease with the departure of the released soul from the body. The aim of escape from reward, now long fixed in the Indian mentality as the highest object of the soul, has replaced the enjoyment of a heaven beyond fixed in the mentality of the devout by many religions as their divine lure. Indian religion also upheld that earlier and a lawyer called when the gross external interpretation of the Vedic hymns was the dominant creed, and the dualists in later India also have kept that as part of their supreme spiritual motive. Undoubtedly, a release from the limitations of the mind and the body into an eternal peace, rest, silence of the spirit makes a higher appeal than the offer of a heaven of mental joy or eternized physical pleasure. But this too, after all, is a lure. Its insistence on the mind's world weariness, the life being shrinking from the adventure of war, strikes a chord of weakness and cannot be the supreme motive. The desire of personal salvation, however high its form, is an outcome of ego. It rests on the idea of our own individuality and its desire for its personal good or welfare, its longing for a release from suffering, or its cry for the extinction of the trouble of becoming, and makes that the supreme aim of our existence. To rise beyond the desire of personal salvation is necessary for the complete rejection of this basis of ego. If we seek the divine, it should be for the sake of the divine and for nothing else, because that is the supreme call of our being, the deepest truth of the spirit. The pursuit of liberation, of the soul's freedom, of the realization of our true and highest self, of union with the divine is justified only because it is the highest law of our nature, because it is the attraction of that which is lower in us to that which is highest, because it is the divine will in us. That is its sufficient justification, its one truest reason. That is its sufficient justification and its one truest reason. All other motives are excrescences, minor or incidental truths or useful lures which the soul must abandon the moment their utility has passed and the state of oneness with the Supreme and with all beings has become our normal consciousness, and the bliss of that state our spiritual atmosphere.
Very big para, long para. But remember one thing, Srinath is beginning the para with the words and never forget that, because that is what he is talking about. Sometimes it is not his own interpretation. Very important. If you miss that, then the whole thing you are going to misunderstand. A prevalent idea would persuade us. Obviously, he is not talking about himself. He is talking about the idea which is current at that time. Okay? A prevalent idea would persuade us. Very clear language, he doesn't agree with it, but the idea is going to persuade you that the sole aim of liberation is to secure for the individual soul freedom from physical rebirth in the unstable life of the universe. So, what's saying clear to you? The idea is liberation for the soul is the ultimate aim of life in this unstable life. Nothing can be done in the unstable life. Does Swami agree with this? Certainly not. Because he doesn't want only freedom from physical rebirth. He wants freedom in physical rebirth. You have to come down into the physical world and yet be free in your consciousness. That is what he wants. So very clearly, this is not what he is saying, but he is telling you what the normal idea is. And he is discussing that. If this freedom is once assured, there is no further work for it in life, here or elsewhere, or only that there is a continued existence of the body demands for the unfulfilled effects of past life necessity. Now this is very interesting. If this freedom is once assured, say the people who understand spirituality as freedom of the soul from the physical life. We don't want to be in physical life anymore. If this freedom is once assured, there is no further work for it in life here or elsewhere. And that's interesting. So is it possible only to work here, or can you work also elsewhere? In other words, you live in the subtle world, or the mental world, or the Ananda Loka, or the Brahma Loka, or the Jana Loka, and now there also you can do some work. I used to have a feeling that there is no work. Okay? But there is a very interesting book which we have discussed, written by Parsi lady who established connection with her two sons who died in a car accident. And they used to tell her what they are doing in the physical world. Okay? So, everything that you are doing here, they will do there only also. Okay? It's very interesting. Then, I think most of you know John Ganguly. Okay? He was Jumu's cousin. She was also my friend. When she passed away, okay, Vishwajita, who had an intuition of many things, even I had an experience of what he told me once, he could say. So he said that he saw this vision in which she is asking, Mother, now that I am not in the physical world and I am here with you in the subtle world, what is the work I should do? So Mother replied, exactly what you are doing in the physical world. You were looking after my room and keeping it clean. You do the same here. So this phrase, okay, work for it in life, here or elsewhere. So this is what it means. Even after freedom, you are in the subtle world, not in the physical world, but you can continue to do work. Okay? The soul is doing the work, is being done. So, very interesting. Life here or elsewhere, or only that which is continued existence in the body. So, which is that work which continued existence in the body demands? Eating, sleeping, and doing other things which is necessary for the maintenance of the body. In Sanskrit, we have a... Yeah?
Rangata, is it the soul or the vital or the mental being which is working in that world?
No, the soul is not working in that sense, but there is a subtle body and a subtle mind and all, they are there. And the divine will is working through the subtle mind and subtle body. The consciousness is static. It is only receiving. but the divine wants. Normally you say that in the higher worlds there is no action. There is action only in the physical world. That is true for the body-mind life. There in the body-mind life, the consciousness is static. But and that also is your choice. You have a choice. Some souls don't want to do any work at all. Okay? So, that's interesting. But see, even one word or elsewhere, Chandra is used, it makes you think. Okay? So, that's why I went into details. Or, only that which continued exists in body demands. These are called in Sanskrit, Sharira Yatra. You have to eat and you have to sleep. These two things are essential. And that also is work. Okay? So others are saying no work is needed except maintenance of body or the unfulfilled effects of past life's necessity. Now that's also interesting. Sometimes an unfulfilled desire, okay, or whatever it be, in the previous life has not yet been exhausted. So after liberation, the old necessity of work will continue in the body-mind life, but you are free. You are liberated, but the body-mind life will continue with the work until its effects are negated and effects are, you are free from that. So you will continue to work depending on what work you have been doing in the past life. This little rapidly exhausted or consumed by the fire of yoga. Now, this fire of yoga also, don't think that it is a symbol. This fire is a figure of speech. It is not really a fire. Huh? Don't think that. There is a real fire in the body. That is the energy in the body. You know very well that the nerves are that which carries the energy in it. Exactly like a computer. Okay? A computer has a body. It has got a CPU. It's got the screen. This is the body. Then its vital is the electric current that you are giving it. That's the vital. And it has a mind also. And what is the mind? The software that you have fed into the body. So this is exactly the body, vital and life. Okay? Very interesting. So it shows that your body, mind, life is a machine which has to be maintained. Okay? This little, rapidly exhausted or consumed by the fire of yoga. When your purification starts, this fire is actually in the body. It is the energy. And energy can take many, many forms. Energy can take the form of electricity. It can take the form of fire. When you are being purified, okay, the fire actually starts burning away the impurities. It can be felt in the body. Yogis feel it as a feverish sensation in the body. There are also many cases where when a man is sleeping, okay, flashes of electricity come out of his body. This also is known, it's a historical fact. Okay, this is recorded specifically in the life of a fellow called U.G. Krishnamurti. Not Radha Krishnamurti. This is U.G. Krishnamurti. He was a very minor and he was a very odd sort of person and he had many arguments with Raman Maharshi also. So, but he had this phenomena is noted in his life. Sparks used to come out. Okay? So, this fire of yoga is a real fire. Don't think it is a figure of speech. Will cease with the departure of the released soul from the body. All this little unfinished work from past life will also get bundled. The aim of escape from rebirth, now long fixed in the Indian mentality, as the highest object of the soul. Does everybody agree? Certainly not. So don't think that this is his idea. He is saying very clearly, long fixed in the Indian mentality, the normal mentality. The aim of escape from rebirth is the highest object of the soul. What does Sri Aurobindo say? Sri Aurobindo says the highest object of the soul is to get freedom but come down again into the physical world with a pure consciousness and obey the commands of God. Not to run away from the physical world. The normal Indian idea, run away from the physical world. The aim of escape from rebirth, now long fixed in the Indian mentality, as the highest object of the soul, has replaced the enjoyment of a heaven beyond, fixed in the mentality of the devout, by many religions as a divine hero. In Christianity, you are judged on Judgment Day, and if you have done good, you go to heaven. Enjoyment of a heaven. This is in Christianity. Or if you have behaved badly, you are sent to hell. So, this idea is not there in the Indian idea. That's what he's saying. It has been replaced. Replacement is permanent enjoyment, but not physical enjoyment. And also in Islam. In Islam, very clearly, this world is not, whatever enjoyments you have not got here, if you go to heaven, you will get all the physical enjoyment. Physical enjoyments, not spiritual enjoyment. You will get there. You know the famous dictum in Islam. 72 virgins are waiting for you in heaven. So, these ideas are all there. None of these ideas are there in this way in India. Okay. Indian religion has also upheld that earlier and lower call when the gross external interpretation of the Vedic hymns was the dominant creed. And the dualists in later India also have kept that as part of a supreme spiritual mode. So, the reverse has been true. In India, you have to do physical works, Vedic works. You recite the Vedic works, go on, use the sacrifice, the yajna, physical, to satisfy your desires here itself. That idea was there in India for some time. Vedic hymns. Undoubtedly, a release of the limitations of the mind and body into eternal peace, rest, silence of the spirit makes a higher appeal than the offer of the heaven of mental joys or eternized physical pleasure. Note what Swami is saying. Eternized physical pleasures very clearly refers to Islam. Okay? And the heaven of mental joys may be Christian theory of going to heaven. But this too, after all, is a lure. It's a carrot dangling in front of you and you try to reach it. Okay? And it's a lure. Its insistence on the mind, world weariness. You get tired of physical life and its sufferings. And you want to go elsewhere. The life being shrinking from the adventure of labor. Life being the vital. The vital shrinking from the adventure of labor. You don't want physical existence in the physical world. It's too hard and full of suffering. Adventure of birth. But certainly this is the word adventure of birth. Taken in the right way, it is really an adventure. Okay? Strikes scorn of weakness and cannot be the supreme. This is his idea also. He is saying that the Indian idea that you want to run away from the physical world, okay, because you are weak and you cannot take the challenge of life in the physical world, adventure of world, then you want to go there. But this is a wrong motive. The real motive should be, according to Sri Aurobindo, work in the physical world for the divine. not for yourself. The desire of personal salvation, however high its form, is an outcome of ego. You are thinking only of your own liberation. It's very good. Certainly you should get liberated. But after all, it's a personal desire. It changes you, but doesn't change others. The desire for personal salvation, however high its form, is an outcome of ego. In other words, you should not want, in Swayanam's view, you should not want liberation because you want to get out of your ego. You have to have aspiration for liberation because you want to do God's work. You want to obey Him. That should be the motive. If we seek the divine, it should be for the sake of the divine and not for anything else, nothing else. Because that is the supreme call of our being. This soul in you wants only liberation to do God's work, not the body-mind life. The body-mind life wants liberation for other reasons, selfish reasons. The deepest root of the spirit. This pursuit of liberation of the soul's freedom, of the realization of our true and higher self, a union with the divine is justified only because it is the highest law of our nature, not for any other reason. Because it is the attraction of that which is lower in us to that which is highest, because it's a divine will in us. That is the sufficient justification, and is one towards which this is Swayanam's opinion. This is Swayanam's reason. That is the sufficient justification, and is one towards which all other motives are excrescences. The word excrescence means protuberance and bulges, unnecessary growths, okay? Like tumors. Okay? They are all unnecessary growths. Minor or accidental growths or useful years which the soul must abandon. Now he used a very interesting word, minor or incidental growths or useful years which the soul must abandon. The soul must not want liberation for yourself. It must want for God's work. The moment their utility has passed and the state of oneness with the Supreme and with all beings has become the normal consciousness and bliss of that state, our spiritual atmosphere. So, there was Swami said towards the end, it is clearly his own idea. Okay? Now, there is 3 minutes. I'll quickly read out the summary of what is to make it short. Yeah, tell me.
I want to ask a question. How can a soul will keep his desire for liberation or abandon this desire for liberation? At the stage of spiritualization, how can a soul will keep this desire of liberation or abandon this desire of liberation?
The desire is not of the soul. The desire of the body-mind life. And you are living in the body-mind life and you are identified with it. So that continues for a long time to influence the soul. The soul gets influenced by the ignorance in the lower life. The soul is not perfect and divine right from the beginning. Don't make that mistake. It is essentially pure, but it is deluded. Are you conscious of your soul? Most of us are not. So that is the proof that the soul is completely identified with the body-mind life. Okay? That's why desire is there. You can't say there is a soul which has got the desire. It is the soul subjected to the laws of ignorance that wants to desire. Precisely Let's see it in a slightly different way. Shiva, did you understand?
Actually, I might have put a wrong word. I just want to ask how the soul will aim at the state of after the spiritualization, then the state of supramaterialization is there, and when the soul is getting liberated in any way of the sadhana, through any way of the sadhana, how the soul will keep the aim of the liberation or not to be liberated. That just I want to say. I think
Okay.
I put the wrong word, desire. So that is not the word actually appropriate. Aim for envisage. That means I want to envisage an aim. Okay.
I understood your question. Okay. You are saying that once the soul gets liberation, which soul will say, I want a further progressive supramentalization? And some souls may not. That is your question. Correct?
Yes, exactly.
That can happen. Because each soul has got a purpose to fulfill. When the soul is created up in heaven, in Satchidananda, and comes down, there is a work given to it, a specific work. Okay? All souls may not feel that. And that's perfectly okay. Okay? You feel you're liberated, you can continue to live, as I said, in the Janaloka, okay, Brahmaloka, okay, Anandaloka. There are so many lokas. And you remain there forever. All these are called siddhas. Okay? They live there in those worlds. I'll give you one instance and then you'll understand. Raman Maharshi was a very, very great yogi. Everybody will agree. Even Mother and Srila said. Srila said he is to live in the truth consciousness. Okay? But someone asked him, you are saying that liberation is enough, but Srila is saying the liberation is not enough, you should go to the supramentalization. You know what he replied? Very interesting reply. He said, there is not even a single sankalpa in me to go beyond what I have done. In other words, his soul was given this task of getting a pure consciousness and spreading it to the world. That was his work. Okay? And you can't say that he is inferior or superior or anything like that. There is no question of superior or inferior in this spiritual field. Each one is given a task. Each soul. So that is very clearly made clear by Ramana's answer. Ramana said, there is absolutely no need or necessity in me. I am not being told that I have to do anything further than this. So it's a very high state. Don't think it's a low state. A very high state. But that was his work. So each one is given a particular work to do. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Dada. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now we can stop here today. We are already 3 minutes beyond our time. So someone, I think...
Yes, we can stop.
I think Archana has already...
I'm noting that.
Yeah.
Yes, Rangata.
Okay.